My life took a nosedive when my ex-wife, a 48-year-old woman who I had been married to for 20 long years, left me for my best friend, a betrayal so raw and painful I still struggle to put it into words. I was 47 at the time, and we had built what I thought was an unbreakable family with 2 children, only to discover that one of those children, a 6-year-old daughter, was not biologically mine but belonged to the man she had chosen over me. From the moment she became pregnant, she carried this secret with her, never once confessing that my name, which appears on the birth certificate, was meant to be the one on her side. I vowed to fight tooth and nail for custody because, legally speaking, that birth certificate means she is my daughter, even if the blood isn't mine. The affair had been simmering for quite some time, and the revelation felt like a brutal kick in the teeth. When I confronted her, desperate to know whether it was him or me, her callous response was, "It's him, because he could get it right back up after sex and go again." That was the only reason, forgetting entirely that I had been juggling 2 jobs to support her through school so she could stay home, raise our children, and while all the while, cheat on me. I sacrificed my dreams and my budding music career, everything I had hoped for, so she could chase her own ambitions and create the family she so craved. Remember to subscribe, like, and share for support of my channel. You won't want to miss a single update on this wild, heartbreaking journey. It pains me to recall that my ex has always been an emotionally distant and icy person, someone whose bipolar moods made life far from easy. The outbursts she unleashed were not just emotional but also physically and verbally abusive. I endured all of it, naively believing that she was somehow beyond her control, until I learned the bitter truth. She admitted to her friends that she often struck me simply because she felt like it or because she wasn't getting her way. Our children were forced to witness these heart-wrenching moments of abuse, seeing their mother lash out at me time and time again. I always swallowed my anger, choosing not to fight back in fear that my children would see me lose control, yet inside I seethed with a growing resentment. The abuse escalated to the point where, one evening, when I came home only to be scolded for not taking out the trash immediately, she grabbed me by the neck and squeezed, all while my young son stood there in horrified silence. I told her in a trembling voice that our son would never forget that moment, and reluctantly, she released her grip. Deep down, I knew I should have left long ago, yet I clung to the hope that keeping our family together would somehow preserve the memory of the woman I once loved. That hope was tragically misplaced. Years had passed, and after everything came to light, she sat down with the very friend whose husband she had been unfaithful with and flatly declared, "Yes, it's true. No, I'm not sorry." Without a backward glance, she got up, walked away, and took the kids with her, moving into an apartment right behind the one we once shared. Even as the chaos unfolded, I held on to a desperate hope that she might eventually realize the grass wasn't greener on the other side. I knew full well that the man she chose was no saint. He had cheated on his own wife multiple times, and even my ex was aware of his history. I spent an entire year waiting for her return, clinging to the idea that she still had the keys to our old apartment because she believed, or perhaps hoped, that one day she would come back home. But as the year ended, the cruelty resumed. I recall the day I was at the bus stop, escorting the kids to school, when this man kept showing up and making a spectacle of himself. He insisted he had come to see my daughter off to school, even though, according to the birth certificate, I was her father. I asked him, incredulously, why he had been so content over the past 5 years to let me raise her, to let me be there at her birth, and to let me give her my last name. Where was he when it came to that responsibility? That confrontation nearly earned me a punch to the face, and it eventually did result in a drunken brawl one night, culminating in him fighting my ex. He later decided to make everything public by bragging on Facebook about his new boyfriend, leaving our mutual friends in shock. I captured every digital trace, the screenshots, every inflammatory message, to remind her of the paternity test that had already sealed her fate. In the aftermath of all this betrayal, I spiraled into self-destructive behaviors, constantly questioning if I could have done something differently. My ex blamed me for not being there enough, failing to pick up the slack at home, even though I was working 2 grueling jobs to keep us afloat. I couldn't muster the energy to clean when I came home because I was simply too exhausted from working 16-hour days, while she would lose her temper over the smallest thing, like not taking out the trash, even though our kids had been the ones scribbling on walls, tearing down blinds, and causing chaos. The worst part was that I longed so desperately for our family to be whole again that I mistakenly believed everything was my fault. The truth slowly dawned on me, catalyzed by my brother's relentless insistence that I join his band. Although I initially declined, he made sure I met the other band members, and that brief encounter turned out to be a turning point. Even though I didn't join the band, I formed a strong friendship with them, and eventually, I began dating a friend introduced by the rhythm guitarist, a 45-year-old woman who brought nothing but love and stability into my life. It was a welcome change from the relentless, 24/7 screaming matches that often ended with me getting hit. Even during this time of newfound happiness, my ex continued to haunt our lives. Despite having lost the keys to our old apartment, she would occasionally let herself in to drop off items for the kids. The first time she did this while my new girlfriend was present, things went terribly wrong. That very night, she called me in a fury demanding to know who my girlfriend was and why she was in our former home. I told her bluntly that my girlfriend was none of her concern. It wasn't long before she moved on, leaving me for someone else again, and in the months that followed, her behavior grew erratic. She even began stalking my girlfriend, sending a barrage of friend requests on Facebook and demanding that my girlfriend accept them. When my girlfriend refused, my ex launched into a tirade on the phone, screaming that I needed to convince her to accept the request so she could see the kind of person my girlfriend was. In response, my girlfriend snatched the phone from me, making it crystal clear that anything related to our kids would only be discussed via messenger or phone calls. My ex was to have no access to our private lives or our inner circle of friends and family. Not long after, my girlfriend showed me a flurry of new friend requests from people who were connected with my ex, and then my ex began showing up uninvited at my place every weekend. I wasn't even home when she snuck in to snoop, and I could hear her wandering around as I spoke on the phone with my girlfriend, who was staying with me for the day. When my girlfriend politely asked if she needed something, my ex claimed she was simply there to check how much milk I had in the fridge for when the kids visited. My girlfriend curtly informed her that we had everything under control, and my ex eventually left. When I returned home, I demanded that she return the apartment key since she no longer lived there. Instead, she brazenly took my son's keys and made copies for herself, as if that were acceptable. When my lease finally expired, my girlfriend suggested that we move in together to put some distance between us and my ex. This decision set off a chain reaction. My ex did everything in her power to hinder our plans. She called the police, falsely claiming that I was leaving with her belongings, and when questioned about what exactly belonged to her, she couldn't name a single item that wasn't rightfully mine. Now, we have a custody arrangement where I get the kids every other weekend, but my children have been forced to abide by her strange rule. They aren't allowed to discuss what they did while with me because she supposedly doesn't want to hear it. Of course, that didn't last long, because soon she began to pry even further, bombarding the kids with questions, likely out of jealousy. My girlfriend and I now live near the beach in a comfortable home, and when we have the kids, we take them on delightful excursions to the boardwalk, where we ride the rides, play on the beach, or visit the aquarium. Yet, if the children ever come home with a prize or token of joy, my ex promptly discards it as if it were trash. I began to notice a disturbing pattern every time my ex dropped off the kids. She started dressing and styling her hair in a manner uncannily similar to my girlfriend's. It wasn't long before she began to mimic every activity we did with the children. If we went to the beach, she'd take them to the beach. If we visited the zoo, she'd do the same. Even if we served a particular dinner, she insisted on making the same dish and demanded that our kids tell her which parent they preferred. Just last week, my son even begged to live with us, declaring that my ex was crazy. Every single detail, every twist of her manipulative behavior, I am meticulously documenting and will use in court. And then, as if things couldn't get any more bizarre, one night my ex started texting me bizarre messages filled with bears, while my girlfriend sat right beside me. I immediately got defensive, telling my girlfriend that I hadn't asked for those messages and that my ex and I were not on speaking terms in that manner. I handed over my phone so she could see for herself. After scrolling through the ridiculous photos, my ex shirtless, making duck faces in the mirror with her phone, I watched my girlfriend ask for my ex's number just so she could send a few bears of her own, demonstrating how it's done. When I called my ex to confront her, she tried to claim she'd meant to send the messages to someone else. My girlfriend shot back by pointing out that my name is on one end of the alphabet while her boyfriend's name is on the other, and then she demanded to know who the new guy was, as if it were a minor mix-up. Frustrated, my ex hung up. Let me clear up a few misconceptions that keep cropping up in the comments online. First, my girlfriend did not send any bears in return. It was merely her sarcastic, verbal response, meant to highlight my ex's lack of originality. Second, I no longer live in the old apartment I once shared with my wife. I've since moved in with my girlfriend. Despite taking back the keys from my ex, she still managed to hold on to my son's keys, using them as a means to break in repeatedly. Third, I am currently in the middle of a custody battle for my kids. a complicated fight given that I'm not the biological father of my daughter, though the birth certificate cements my legal rights. Fourth, although my ex was prescribed medication, I seriously doubt she's been taking it as directed. And finally, I always make it a point to check my kids for bruises and signs of abuse. Recently, my ex crossed a line by getting physical with her boyfriend, prompting him to punch a hole in the wall and warn her that if she raised a fist again, he would not hesitate to fight back. This past weekend, which marked my daughter's official 6th birthday, turned into yet another chapter in this twisted saga. It wasn't even my weekend to have the kids, but my ex surprised me by asking if I wanted them for her birthday celebration. Naturally, I accepted, and they were even granted an extra 2 days with me. I suspected that my ex and her new boyfriend had some sort of scheme in mind, pawning the kids off on me so they could enjoy themselves, but what struck me most was that this was the first time he was able to celebrate his daughter's birthday. Instead of taking on his role as a responsible father and making the day special, my ex chose to hand everything over to me and my girlfriend. I couldn't help but wonder aloud if anyone else thought this was utterly messed up. On Saturday night, I received an infuriating text from my ex, telling me she hoped I was effing happy because I'd somehow won. I knew I shouldn't have engaged, but I couldn't help asking her what her problem was. Her response was a jumble of nonsensical accusations, eventually escalating to her daring me to gloat times 10, because something terrible had apparently happened to her. She even went so far as to accuse me of colluding with someone, though she never provided a clear answer. Instead, she launched into a diatribe about how all men are pigs and can't be trusted. At that moment it was painfully clear, my ex was drunk, blathering the same idiot nonsense as the man she left me for, a guy who had cheated on his wife 3 times with her, and whom she now ranked as number 3 in her list of conquests. When I mentioned this fact during our breakup, she had nonchalantly replied, "I know what I'm getting into," as if that justified everything. Once she ran out of insults to hurl at me, she pivoted her attack to my new girlfriend, telling me in no uncertain terms that she was ugly as F, and that I could have chosen anyone but that I foolishly opted for someone ugly to replace her. In reality, my girlfriend is breathtakingly stunning inside and out. My ex's jealousy knew no bounds, she even resorted to stalking my girlfriend and attempting to force her to mimic her own appearance. Furthermore, my ex baselessly claimed that I didn't love my new girlfriend and that it was impossible for me to fall in love again so soon after losing her. In truth, my ex and I had been apart for a year before I met my now amazing girlfriend, and it took time for me to trust someone again. That trust had to be earned, and my girlfriend did so without question. She even went on to accuse me, claiming I only loved her because I had lost my apartment and was kissing my girlfriend's crap for a place to live, a twisted notion she summed up as, "It's only love when you're homeless." For the record, I once had an apartment just across the street from my ex-wife's complex, but she chose to stay there, flaunting every painful reminder of the fact that she had left me for my best friend. When my lease expired, I moved in with my girlfriend and relocated my job. I knew my ex was trying to provoke a fight, but I refused to give her the satisfaction. When I thought her attacks couldn't get any more childish, she had the audacity to apologize, saying she was sorry she wasn't enough for me. In that moment, I wanted nothing more than to scream that it was me who wasn't good enough, but she seemed to have forgotten entirely which one of us had walked out the door first. Then, as if the drama weren't intense enough, my ex began targeting my girlfriend once again, insisting that deep down, I had always wanted to be with her instead of my current partner, claiming that my girlfriend could never compete with the woman I once knew. At that point, I had had enough. I told her to get in touch only when she was sober and had the presence of mind to turn my phone off for a few hours. Hours later, when my girlfriend came home, she asked what was wrong. I warned her that my ex's messages would surely set her off, and so I handed her my phone to read the texts for herself. After reading them, my girlfriend simply laughed off the absurdity, handing the phone back to me with a remark like, "Looks like he cheated." I tried to reassure her, thinking that the ugly, spiteful comments might make her question my decisions, but nothing fazed her. She simply noted that my ex's narcissistic tendencies really come out in full force when she's drunk, and she bet that my ex was furious because she couldn't come to me for a revenge as payback for her actions. I haven't heard anything else from my ex since then, and my guess is that she reviewed those texts the next day, realized how foolish she sounded, and perhaps even went back to him because she can't stand being alone. Reflecting on 20 long years of abuse, I now see that much of what I experienced was a form of narcissistic guilt-tripping, a twisted, subconscious manipulation that left me perpetually walking on eggshells. I even developed the habit of checking my phone as soon as it rang, showing my girlfriend every call to avoid any suspicions or fights. Although I no longer feel the need to constantly share every message, old habits die hard. My girlfriend often teases me that I'm doing it again, and while I know it's a coping mechanism from my past, it leaves me feeling exposed and vulnerable. The journey of recovery isn't just about healing from the betrayal and the infidelity, it's about unlearning all the controlling behaviors that were forced upon me. Just when you think you've regained your sense of self, you find yourself slipping back into old patterns in a new relationship, desperately trying not to rock the boat. It's a long, arduous road to true recovery. As of my last update, a new twist emerged. My ex was cheated on by the very man she left me for, and, as many of us predicted, they reconciled just 3 days later. I had anticipated that she'd be left with no one to fall back on, and it seems she's now stuck with him. Since that final incident, I haven't heard anything more from her apart from a few administrative communications regarding our divorce and the ongoing discussion about custody for the kids. I'm somewhat relieved by the lack of drama, but I know it's only a matter of time before she gets drunk again and I'm subjected to another one of her rants. Around Halloween, my band was asked to perform at a traditional event hosted by a friend, a party my ex used to attend with me before I uncovered her sordid affair with my best friend and the truth about my daughter's paternity. Although she wasn't even invited this time, she showed up with her boyfriend, the same man she left me for, who had a history of cheating on his wife and even on my kids. I was absolutely furious, as children are never meant to be dragged into these adult confrontations. The event was strictly for grown-ups, yet she was determined to cause a scene, insisting that the kids wanted to see their father play. Security repeatedly informed her that she wasn't allowed inside, and when she continued to argue that my priorities were skewed, my friend, the host, stepped in, stating that she could stay to watch for 2 songs, but only if she left immediately afterward. When she refused, he threatened to call the police. I told him not to indulge her, but he explained that he was doing it for the kids' sake. The night was a mess. I was on stage, distracted and nervous, frequently scanning the crowd to see if a physical altercation would break out. After the performance, I learned that my ex had clashed with my girlfriend. My girlfriend stood her ground and publicly called her out for manipulating our children as pawns. Witnesses confirmed that the altercation ended with my ex glaring venomously at my girlfriend from across the room. In a moment of pure, unfiltered humiliation, my daughter announced to everyone that she had 2 daddies, me and her mommy's boyfriend, who, in her mind, was truly her real father. This public declaration further humiliated my ex, who retorted bitterly, "Thanks for making me sound like trash," before storming off. My son, however, refused to leave with her, clinging to me instead. Later, my ex's boyfriend even contacted my girlfriend to negotiate keeping my son with her, and although they reached some understanding, the night left me emotionally shattered. I spent the entire evening apologizing over and over to my friend, my girlfriend, and my son for dragging them into this chaotic mess. I couldn't concentrate on my songs because all I could think about was the possibility of a physical fight breaking out. When I eventually found out that my ex had abandoned my son during the pickup, I was overwhelmed with grief. That night, I received a call from my son explaining that there was a terrible fight going on at his mother's, triggered by her ex's frustration over me moving on. I could hear them screaming in the background, and when I asked if he needed me to come get him, he said no. I stayed on the line until the yelling subsided. Despite the turmoil, I keep forging ahead. I'm still in the midst of a divorce, still fighting for custody, and determined to protect my children from the wreckage of my past. Matters took another unexpected turn when my 6-year-old daughter began incessantly talking about an elf on the shelf that belonged to her soon-to-be ex-wife. Hoping to cheer her up, my girlfriend purchased one and set it up at our home, thinking that my daughter would be excited to see a similar festive decoration. What happened next was nothing short of alarming. The moment my daughter saw the elf, she erupted into a furious tantrum, screaming that it needed to leave immediately or she would tell Santa that it was bad and tells lies. She went into such a wild fit that my girlfriend had to try and calm her by explaining that the elf wouldn't lie. If she behaved well, Santa would know, but if she was bad, Santa wouldn't lie either. Instead of being reassured, my daughter bared her teeth, shot a murderous look at my girlfriend, and growled, "He's going to tell on me." I was left reeling, questioning in my mind why my daughter reacted so violently to this particular elf when, inexplicably, she had no such issues with the one at her mother's house. I began to wonder what else might be wrong at her mother's side that my ex was so blatantly ignoring. Over the years, I've had problems with my daughter fabricating stories, claiming, for example, that her brother hits her even when he isn't anywhere near her. I had raised these issues with my soon-to-be ex-wife, who merely responded that she was aware and was handling it. Today, as I dropped the kids off, I resolved to confront her about the elf incident, feeling that it was symptomatic of deeper, unaddressed problems. I suspect there's a serious issue unfolding over there, something that might warrant therapy, because it's becoming crystal clear that my ex is ignoring far more than just the lies. At her current residence, my ex is treated like a princess simply because her new partner, the real father, as my daughter might believe, is there to indulge her every whim. I've also learned that he frequently gives my son a hard time, simply because my son is mine. My girlfriend and I recently sat down with the kids and discussed their behavior. When I asked my son if my daughter misbehaved at home by lying or trying to incite trouble, he said not as much as expected, leaving us puzzled. When we pressed my daughter on why she would lie about her brother's behavior, she defensively claimed that he had hit her, just moments ago, even though he was busy taking out the trash. When we pointed out the inconsistencies, she grew angry, raised her fist at my girlfriend, and threatened her. In response, I took away her TV privileges and video games, demanding to know why she couldn't behave. She glared at me as if daring me to enforce stricter discipline, and I knew then that I had to step up if these patterns were to end. The situation escalated further when my daughter's meltdown over the elf on the shelf unshackled a cascade of even larger issues. Over the weekend, after my girlfriend and I bought my daughter an elf on the shelf, motivated by her constant praise for the one at her mother's house, my daughter reacted with unbridled fury. She screamed that the elf had to go because it was going to tell Santa on her, which left me questioning why the elf at her mother's home was acceptable while ours wasn't. Seeking answers, I asked around but received nothing concrete. Later, at dinner with my girlfriend's ex-stepmother, whose family history is fraught with its own betrayals, including her father's infidelity, I was reminded of the depth of unresolved issues. The stepmother casually mentioned an incident of abuse that my girlfriend had suffered at the hands of her stepfather, a revelation that visibly unsettled my son. On the drive home, my son finally broke his silence about the tumult at home. It appears that the ex-wife of my soon-to-be ex-wife's boyfriend has been orchestrating a campaign of vengeance against my ex and her new partner. She's determined to wreak havoc on their lives by any means necessary, even going so far as to use her own children as pawns in an effort to attack my son, simply because he is the son of the woman who took her husband away. In a twisted, almost surreal turn, these kids are now encouraging my daughter, who, by all accounts, is actually my daughter, to join in on the attack against my son. When I asked my daughter if it was all just a game, she replied in a matter-of-fact tone that it was. I tried to explain that it wasn't fair to her brother and that it was mean, but she broke down in tears, accusing me of trying to rob her of fun. I warned her that if she continued this behavior, there would be serious consequences: no TV, no toys, no video games, and that I would not tolerate any mistreatment of her brother. Later, when I dropped the kids off, I confronted my ex about the chaos she was causing. She claimed that the OBS, the other person's side, was doing everything possible to make their lives miserable, sabotaging their schedules and affecting them financially, even predicting an ugly Christmas for them. I told her about how her kids were being coached to mistreat my son and how my daughter was being trained to join in, but she coldly replied that there was only so much she could do, and that she couldn't watch them every minute of the day. I insisted that if she was aware of these issues, she needed to take action immediately, because the problems spilling over into my home were intolerable. The lack of discipline on her side meant that my daughter had learned there were no consequences for her actions, a lesson that had to be relearned every other weekend with me. Now, with this new information, I've decided that I must raise these issues in court and press the point that my kids are being emotionally and even physically abused by her side's influence. Today marked the final chapter of our long, torturous divorce. We both joined a Zoom court call, and in a matter of 5 brief minutes, it was all over. Neither of us contested the divorce. There were no dramatic speeches, no paternity tests called for, just a few quick questions that barely scratched the surface of our dark past. I was asked if there was any chance to save the marriage, and I simply replied, no, today I want to proceed with the divorce. I found it ironic that the court asked my ex about any domestic issues or abuse, to which she answered no, despite the many times I had been hit. In the end, it didn't matter, because everything was coming to a close. All that remains now is the family court battle over custody of the kids, and given everything that's happened, it's looking more and more in my favor. My ex wasted exactly 5 minutes after the court call before posting the news all over Facebook. My phone exploded with screenshots from friends admonishing her for seeking social media attention at a time like this. She even tagged me, which my friends derided as an example of how divorce should not be handled if one wishes to set a good example for the children. Despite the outpouring of opinions from strangers online, I sat there feeling numb, not quite sure how I was supposed to feel, just a blank void of emotion in the wake of it all. It's been a while since I last updated anyone, and I want to thank everyone who reached out during this difficult period. My divorce was finalized just last month, which, although it marks the end of one chapter, only means that there's still a battle ahead over custody. We had a relatively decent Christmas, aside from the fact that my ex lost her job and her new boyfriend, whom she moved in with, is not earning enough to make ends meet. In a desperate moment, she even came to me asking for help with the kids. I wanted nothing more than to tell her to kick rocks, but I restrained myself. I couldn't expose the kids to further negativity, especially not on Christmas. I made it clear that it would be a one-time assistance, and never again would I help her out financially. When she showed up to pick up the presents, she even demanded to see where the kids slept, a demand I rejected outright. She insisted that it was her right, but my girlfriend put her in her place, declaring that my ex was not welcome in her home. The confrontation escalated until my ex finally backed down, and I spent the rest of the night trying to calm my girlfriend, who was seething with anger and ready to confront my ex physically. My girlfriend has now taken a firm stance, effectively barring my ex from our lives. While some might call me an idiot for letting my girlfriend take the reins, she's proven to be an unmovable rock, immune to my ex's manipulations and adept at calling out the bullshit whenever it arises. Since then, my ex hasn't been able to play her usual games. I've also started therapy for the kids, installing a camera in the living room to monitor their behavior. The camera has captured numerous instances of my daughter lying, even punching my son and falsely accusing him of hitting her. We've confronted her with the evidence, and slowly she seems to be learning that her lies don't hold water. Meanwhile, my son is growing increasingly frustrated by the lengthy court process that prevents him from living full-time with me, though I'm relieved that his bond with my girlfriend remains strong. Adding another twist to this already convoluted tale, I recently discovered that my girlfriend's ex-boyfriend has started stalking her. I learned of this bizarre development from another one of her exes, our bandmate, who originally introduced me to her. This ex-boyfriend apparently lost it the other night, and in a fit of desperation and jealousy, he even crashed his car into a guardrail. My life has become so unpredictable and chaotic that sometimes I wonder whether I should laugh, cry, or even sell tickets to the show that is my life. Now, 2 years after that fateful day, and 4 months after the divorce was finalized, I can honestly say that I'm in a much better place. My ex is still with the man she once ran off with, and while I moved on nearly a year ago, I'm constantly uncovering new, painful details about our past. I learned that she had slept with another friend of mine before getting involved with the AP, and though I wish I could say it didn't sting, it only deepened the wounds of betrayal. I know for a fact that my daughter isn't mine, and sometimes I even wonder about my son, who doesn't look like me at all. None of his features match mine, and only some resemble hers. As much as I'm tempted to seek the truth, I wonder if I really want to know. The thought of another devastating blow is almost too much to bear. Ignorance, they say, is bliss, and I try to bury as much of her memory as possible. Yet, co-parenting until the kids turn 18 means I can't simply erase the past. I attempted to use the gray rock method, striving for amicability to show the kids that we could work together for their sake. It's maddening how the guilty parties never cease to lash out, constantly shifting blame even after everything has been said and done. My ex still tries to control me and dictate terms from afar, but she's met her match in my strong-willed girlfriend, a force to be reckoned with who's well-versed in dealing with sociopathic narcissists. In the end, I've managed to rebuild my life. I have a new job, a new home, and a new love that has helped me move forward, far away from the toxic environment my ex created. While my ex continues to wreak havoc, ruining not only our once shared life but also the life of her AP and even tormenting his ex-wife, I can't help but feel a pang of sorrow for the damage it's causing my children. My ex has already lost her job, and she now relies on the AP, who himself is being financially squeezed by his own ex. I don't feel any pity for her. All I care about is protecting my kids. I'm fighting for custody of both of them, yes, even the daughter who isn't biologically mine, because I need to get them out of her destructive orbit. My son has developed a deep resentment towards his mother, all because she's the one who explained our divorce to him. He even makes it a point to remind everyone that his sister is the AP's child. I try not to burden my new girlfriend with all my issues, but my son's anger is palpable. On the bright side, his bond with my girlfriend is unbreakable. She's his best friend. Meanwhile, my daughter has inherited her mother's manipulative tendencies. She lies, she schemes, and she uses every trick in the book when things don't go her way. The cameras we installed have become an invaluable tool in catching her red-handed. Whether it's falsely accusing someone of meanness or blaming my son for imaginary injuries, the footage leaves no doubt. When my daughter once decided to dive off the couch, pretending the floor was lava, and ended up with a bruise, my ex immediately screamed child abuse, and even attempted to pin the blame on my girlfriend. I quickly sent her the video as evidence of what truly happened. Eventually, my ex seemed to understand that no one was hurting the kids, and we managed to document every bump and bruise. Although it pains me to resort to surveillance measures in my own home, I take solace in the fact that my ex can no longer manipulate the narrative. It also helps ease my trust issues when I'm away at work, knowing I can check in on my girlfriend, who is safely at home reading a book, watching a movie, or playing online games with my son and his little brother. These cameras, while invasive to some, grant me a peace of mind that is absolutely priceless. Looking back over these tumultuous years, I can finally say that the day of reckoning has come. Today, we sat on a Zoom court call that officially ended our marriage. It all happened in a blur, a mere 5 minutes during which neither of us contested the divorce. There were no dramatic pleas or revelations, just a few curt questions about whether there was any possibility of reconciliation, to which I firmly replied that it was over. I found it almost comical that the court asked my ex if she'd ever experienced domestic abuse, an issue I had endured countless times, only for her to reply in denial. In the end, nothing could change the outcome. All that remains now is a family court battle for custody, and given the current circumstances, things seem to be tipping in my favor. I couldn't help but notice that exactly 5 minutes after our call ended, my ex posted everything on Facebook, lamenting how hard divorce is while tagging me. My friends immediately flooded my phone with screenshots and scathing comments about how she was seeking attention at the worst possible moment. Even though none of you know me personally, I'm sharing this with a community of strangers because it feels like the only way to process this avalanche of emotions. And so, I find myself feeling strangely blank, lost in a void where all the pain, anger, and betrayal seem to have merged into nothingness. It's been some time since I last opened up about everything, and I genuinely appreciate everyone who reached out during these dark days. My divorce was finalized last month, marking the end of one turbulent chapter, yet the custody battle still looms ahead. Overall, Christmas was decent, except for a few hiccups. My ex lost her job, and her new boyfriend, who she's now living with, is barely making enough to survive. In a desperate last-minute scramble, she turned to me for help with the kids' gifts, which meant my girlfriend and I had to dash around trying to find suitable presents after stores were already cleared out. Despite feeling the urge to confront her for putting the kids through this, I held back. I couldn't let them see the bitter side of her. I made it clear that this would be a one-time exception and that I wouldn't help her again. When she insisted on coming over to check where the kids slept, I refused, and she responded as if it were her right. But my girlfriend wasn't having any of it. She confronted my ex in no uncertain terms, stating that she was not allowed anywhere near our home. My ex eventually relented, and I spent the remainder of the night trying to soothe my girlfriend, who was fuming and ready to tear my ex apart. My girlfriend has now effectively locked my ex out of our lives. Some might say I'm foolish for letting her handle these matters, but she's been nothing short of a rock, unwavering and firm, when my ex attempts to manipulate me. Since that day, my ex hasn't dared to play any more games. I've also taken a proactive step by enrolling my kids in therapy and installing cameras in our living room. These measures have exposed the extent of my daughter's habitual lying, her frequent punching of my son, and her baseless claims that he hurt her. We've confronted her about her behavior, and while it's a slow process, she's beginning to understand that her lies have consequences. My son, on the other hand, is becoming increasingly frustrated with the drawn-out court process that keeps him from living with me full-time, though his bond with my girlfriend remains unshaken. Amidst all this, a new crisis has emerged. My girlfriend's ex-boyfriend has inexplicably started stalking her. I was alerted to this situation by another former boyfriend of hers, our bandmate, who was shocked to hear that he had to be told she was happy moving on, prompting him to go so far as to crash his car into a guardrail. My life is so chaotic right now that I'm not sure whether to laugh, cry, or even start selling tickets to this tragic circus. 2 years have passed since that fateful day, and although my divorce was finalized just 4 months ago, I can honestly say my life is infinitely better without her toxicity. My ex is still clinging to her new partner, and while I moved on almost a year ago, I continue to unearth painful details from our past. I learned that she had been with another friend of mine before her affair with the AP, and even though that stung, it only served to highlight just how long I had been a fool, missing the warning signs not once, but twice. I know for sure that my daughter isn't biologically mine, and sometimes I wonder about my son. He doesn't resemble me at all, none of his features match mine, and only a few reflect her traits. As much as I'm tempted to search for the truth, I'm also terrified of the possibility of facing another devastating blow. Perhaps ignorance is truly bliss. I try to leave as much of her behind me as possible, but co-parenting until our kids turn 18 forces me to confront our shared history every day. I once tried to adopt a gray rock approach, believing that we could be civil for the sake of the children. It's ironic how, even after all is said and done, the guilty party continues to launch attacks and shift blame, as if she still has some semblance of control. Even after all her attempts to manipulate me and dictate terms from afar, my girlfriend has shown me what it means to stand strong and resist. In the end, I've managed to rebuild my life with a new job, a new home, and a new love that truly supports me. I'm thriving in a way my ex could never imagine, even as she deals with the consequences of her own actions. Not only did she ruin our life together, but she also dragged down her AP, whose ex-wife is now doing everything in her power to make their lives a living hell. Sadly, this chaos is affecting my kids too. The AP's wife is the embodiment of the phrase, "Hell hath no fury," and her actions have had severe financial and emotional repercussions. My ex has already come to me on several occasions, complaining about her poor mouth, but I can't feel sorry for her. I only have eyes for my children, and I'm committed to providing for them without enabling her self-destructive behavior. I'm fighting for custody of both of my kids, even the one who isn't biologically mine, because I need to remove them from her toxic environment. My son has developed a deep-seated resentment toward his mother, and he makes sure everyone knows that his sister is the AP's child. While I try not to burden my new girlfriend with all this baggage, my son's anger is palpable. Thankfully, his bond with my girlfriend remains unbreakable, and she has become his best friend. As for my daughter, she's inherited her mother's knack for manipulation. She lies, schemes, and reacts with all the same tactics when things don't go her way. The cameras in our home have proven invaluable in catching her in the act, whether she's accusing my son of hitting her or blaming others for her own mistakes. For instance, when my daughter once took a dive off the couch and ended up with a bruise, my ex immediately screamed child abuse and even tried to pin the blame on my girlfriend. I had no choice but to send her the video as proof of what really happened. After a few weeks, my ex finally came to terms with the reality that no one in our home was being hurt, and we managed to document every little bump and scratch. While it's painful to admit that I've had to resort to surveillance in my own home, it gives me a measure of peace knowing that my ex can no longer manipulate the narrative. It also allows me to check in on my girlfriend when I'm away at work, ensuring she's safe and secure, whether she's reading, watching a movie, or playing online with my son and his little brother. These cameras help me manage my trust issues, and for that, I'm incredibly grateful. Looking back on it all, today marked the day I finally put an end to that painful chapter. In a brief 5-minute Zoom court session, our divorce was finalized. I remember thinking in a haze that I'd imagined this day a million times over the last year, and now it was here, almost anticlimactic in its swiftness. There were no dramatic farewells or bitter last words. We simply answered a few curt questions, questions that barely scratched the surface of our long history of abuse and betrayal. I was asked if there was any chance to save the marriage, and I simply said no. It was almost laughable how the court inquired about domestic abuse, given that I'd been hit more times than I care to remember, and yet my ex insisted there were no issues. In the end, it didn't matter, the divorce was final. All that remains is the looming battle over custody of the kids, and with everything that's transpired, I'm confident that the scales are tipping in my favor. I couldn't help but notice that within 5 minutes of the session ending, my ex posted everything on Facebook, lamenting how hard divorce is and tagging me in her post. My phone exploded with screenshots from friends criticizing her for seeking attention on social media at such a delicate time. Even though none of you know me personally, I'm sharing all of this because it's the only way I can truly process the whirlwind of emotions coursing through me. And so, here I am, feeling strangely numb, caught between the pain of the past and the uncertainty of the future. Since then, things have continued to evolve. My divorce was finalized last month, and while that obstacle is now behind me, the custody battle is still very much alive. Christmas was mostly pleasant, despite my ex losing her job and her current boyfriend, with whom she's now living, not making enough to meet their needs. In a moment of desperation, she reached out to me for help with the kids' gifts, an action that forced my girlfriend and me into a mad scramble to find appropriate presents after every store had already been picked clean. I almost lashed out, tempted to let my kids see the real, bitter side of her, but I held back for their sake. I made it clear that this was a one-time favor and that I wouldn't be offering help again. When she insisted on coming in to check where the kids slept, I flatly refused. She argued that it was her right, but my girlfriend immediately stepped in, telling her that she had no place in our home and that any concerns should be addressed by making a phone call, not by intruding. Ultimately, my ex backed down, and I spent the rest of that night trying to calm my girlfriend, who was on the verge of confronting my ex physically. My girlfriend has since made it unmistakably clear, my ex has absolutely no place in our lives. Some might think I'm naive for letting her take control in this situation, but I know deep down that my girlfriend's unwavering strength is exactly what I needed. Since that confrontation, my ex hasn't attempted any more manipulative games. Meanwhile, I've taken additional steps for my children's well-being by starting therapy and installing cameras in our living room. These cameras have caught my daughter in numerous acts of lying, even instances where she physically attacked my son or falsely claimed that he had hurt her. We confronted her with the evidence, and while it's a slow process, she's gradually learning that her lies won't work. My son, frustrated with the drawn-out court process that prevents him from living with me full-time, has also started acting out at his mother's, screaming, punching walls, and arguing. I know he desperately wants out of that toxic environment, and I'm doing everything in my power to make that happen. As if that weren't enough, a new problem has surfaced. My girlfriend's ex-boyfriend has inexplicably begun stalking her. I learned about this bizarre development from another one of her exes, our bandmate, who originally introduced me to her. Apparently, when he was told that she was happy moving on, he lost control and ended up crashing his car into a guardrail. The craziness in my life has reached such heights that sometimes I'm not sure whether to laugh, cry, or even sell tickets to this tragic performance. Looking back now, I realize that while the scars of the past still remain, I've managed to carve out a better life for myself and my children. My ex may still be with the AP, and I may continue to uncover painful truths about our history, but I refuse to let those betrayals define me. I have a new home, a new job, and a new love that stands in stark contrast to the chaos my ex created. Even though I still have to co-parent until our kids reach 18, I'm determined to shield them from the toxic influence of my ex's world. My son has grown resentful towards his mother for explaining our divorce to him in a way that only fueled his anger, and he makes sure everyone knows that his sister is the AP's child. While I try to keep my new relationship free of old baggage, I cannot ignore the fact that my daughter continues to exhibit the same manipulative behaviors as her mother. Our home is now under constant surveillance with cameras that serve not only as a deterrent against her misbehavior but also as a reassurance that I can protect my children even when I'm not there. If my daughter gets a bruise or even tries to claim that someone hurt her when it was just a playful dive off the couch, I have irrefutable evidence to show what really happened. These measures might seem extreme to some, but they give me the peace of mind that I need. I can check in on my girlfriend when I'm at work, see that she's safe at home, and know that my children are not being exploited by the manipulative tactics of my ex. Every day is a reminder of the painful past and the long road to recovery, from enduring years of abuse and betrayal to unlearning the controlling habits imposed on me. I'm slowly unraveling the internal mess that has haunted me for so long, and even though I sometimes feel like I'm walking on eggshells, I know I'm making progress. The recovery isn't just about healing from the infidelity, it's about rediscovering who I am without the influence of a narcissistic, manipulative ex-wife. It's a long, arduous journey, but with every passing day, I'm learning to stand tall and reclaim my life. I share all of this not to garner sympathy, but to lay bare the raw, unfiltered truth of my journey, a journey filled with betrayal, abuse, heartbreak, and ultimately, a hard-won victory over the toxic forces that once ruled my life. This isn't just my story, it's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a chronicle of overcoming even when the odds seem insurmountable. And as I continue to fight for custody, for my children's well-being, and for my own peace of mind, I hope that by sharing these details, others in similar situations might find the strength to stand up for themselves too.